September 2, 2018. I still remember the smell of fresh notebooks and the sound of rain tapping against the classroom windows. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My head rested on my folded arms as the morning bell echoed through the halls of Westbridge Academy, the most prestigious private high school in the city. Students rushed through the corridors in perfectly pressed uniforms. Teachers prepared their lessons and everything looked exactly as it had 10 years ago. Slowly, I lifted my head. The familiar classroom surrounded me. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, reflecting off polished wooden desks. On the wall hung the same banner celebrating Westbridge Academy's 100th anniversary. Every detail was exactly as I remembered. My heart stopped. When I looked down at my hands, they were younger, smooth, without the scars earned from years of exhausting work, without the calluses that had appeared after life forced me to survive instead of dream. I touched my own face, almost afraid it would disappear. Then I looked toward the front of the room. There he was, Adrian Hayes. He was laughing with his friends near the window, his navy blue blazer hanging casually over one shoulder. Just like every girl in school, I had once believed he looked perfect. Tall, confident, effortlessly kind. He was the grandson of the founder of Hayes Group, one of the largest companies in the country. Teachers admired him, classmates respected him, and I had loved him. Or at least, I believed I did. A sharp pain shot through my chest as memories rushed back all at once. The hospital room, my parents' graves, Noah's funeral, the empty apartment where I had taken my last breath, the unbearable loneliness. My knees nearly gave out beneath my desk. I wasn't dreaming. I had died, and so Mahawi had come back, before I could make sense of it. The classroom door opened. Our homeroom teacher, Mrs. Anderson, stepped inside carrying a folder. "Good morning, everyone," she said, with her usual warm smile. "Before we begin today's lesson, I'd like you all to welcome a new transfer student." My entire body froze. Nope, seen it today. A girl walked into the classroom wearing the same academy uniform as the rest of us. Her chestnut hair fell neatly over her shoulders, and her bright eyes searched the room with what looked like nervous uncertainty. She gave a small bow. "My name is Chloe Bennett," she said softly. "I just transferred here. I hope we can all become friends." The class immediately welcomed her. Some students applauded, others smiled. I couldn't move. I knew that smile. I knew that voice, because in my first life that was the moment my family was sentenced to death. Mrs. Anderson looked around the room before pointing toward the empty desk beside Adrian. "Chloe, why don't you sit there?" Adrian immediately stood and pulled the chair out for her. "Welcome to Westbridge," she smiled shyly. "Thank you." Their eyes met for only a second. Most people would have forgotten that moment before lunch. I never could, because that single act of kindness became the beginning of everything. I lowered my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. This was the day it all started. The day I lost the man I loved. The day I lost my future. The day I unknowingly began destroying my own family. In my first life, I had believed Chloe's arrival was nothing more than coincidence. I couldn't have been more wrong. As the teacher began the lesson, I barely heard a word. My mind had already returned to the life I had lived, and the nightmare that followed. Back then, I was Westbridge Academy's top student. My grades ranked first in every semester. I was captain of the debate team, president of the student council, and the school's representative in national academic competitions. Teachers trusted me enough to leave classrooms under my supervision. Students often came to me for help before important exams. Life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. My father, Michael Carter, worked as a senior operations manager at Hayes Group. He had spent nearly 20 years building his career through honesty and hard work. My mother, Laura Carter, worked in the company's finance department, where everyone admired her dedication. Together, they had one dream they talked about almost every weekend. One day, my father always said with a smile, "We'll open our own little cafe." My mother would laugh and answer the same way every time. "When both of you graduate, we'll finally have the courage." Neither of them ever found that courage, because they never got the chance. My younger brother, Noah, was only 14. He wanted to become an engineer and spent every afternoon building ridiculous little machines in our garage. Half of them exploded. The other half somehow worked. Our house was always noisy, always warm, always full of laughter. Looking back now, those ordinary evenings were the happiest moments of my entire first life. I had everything I needed: a loving family, a bright future, a boyfriend who told me I was the only girl he could ever imagine spending his life with. If someone had asked me then whether I believed my life could fall apart, I would have laughed, because I had no idea that evil rarely announces itself. So Matimisit simply smiles, introduces itself politely, and asks if it can sit beside you. I slowly looked toward Chloe. She was listening carefully to the lesson, occasionally smiling at Adrian whenever he explained something she didn't understand. She looked harmless, fragile, exactly the way I remembered. No one in that classroom could see what was coming. Not the teachers, not my classmates, not Adrian, only me. Because I had already lived through the ending, and this team, I refused to let history repeat itself. I spent the rest of that morning pretending to pay attention, but my eyes never left Chloe Bennett. Every smile, every timid glance, every carefully chosen word unfolded exactly as I remembered. She wasn't trying to become the most popular girl in school. She was doing something far more dangerous. She was becoming the girl everyone wanted to protect. Within days, the entire class adored her. She always looked slightly overwhelmed, always thanked everyone for the smallest favor, and somehow managed to make every act of kindness feel like a heroic rescue. If someone carried her books, she acted as though they had saved her life. If someone explained a homework assignment, she praised them for being brilliant. She had an extraordinary talent for making people feel important, especially Adrian. At first, it was nothing. He lent her a notebook after she claimed she had forgotten hers. The next day, he stayed after class to help her catch up on lessons. A week later, they were eating lunch together because, according to Chloe, she didn't know anyone else. I remembered watching all of it in my first life, telling myself I was being jealous over nothing. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. The second came only a few days later. I was walking toward chemistry class when I heard a scream from the staircase. Students rushed into the hallway just in time to see Chloe sitting on the floor, tears streaming down her face. Adrian reached her before anyone else. "Chloe, are you okay?" She nodded weakly before glancing in my direction. "I think someone bumped into me." The entire hallway turned toward me. "I wasn't even near you," I said immediately. "I know," Chloe answered quickly, wiping away her tears. "I'm sure it was an accident." Those words should have cleared my name. Instead, they made everyone suspect me even more. Adrian looked at me with disappointment. "You could at least apologize." "For what?" "She got hurt. I didn't touch her," he sighed, as though I were refusing to admit an obvious mistake. "It's okay," Chloe whispered, gently tugging on his sleeve. "Please don't argue because of me." That sentence changed everything. She never accused me directly. She simply created situations where everyone else reached the conclusion for her. It was brilliant and terrifying. Looking back now, I realized why Adrian had fallen for her so easily. I had never needed him. I solved my own problems. I won my own competitions. When I struggled with calculus, I studied harder instead of asking for help. When I lost a debate, I practiced until I became better. I had always believed independence was a strength. For Adrian, it gave him no reason to feel needed. Chloe was different. Every day she found another excuse to depend on him. She couldn't carry heavy boxes. She didn't understand advanced mathematics. She was afraid of public speaking. She got lost on campus. She forgot assignments. She was always one small problem away from needing Adrian to rescue her. Without realizing it, he slowly became addicted to being her hero. A month after Chloe arrived, the rumors started. Someone claimed I had mocked her accent. Someone else said I had hidden her textbook. Another student insisted they had heard me call her an attention seeker. None of it was true, but lies spread through a school much faster than facts. Even teachers began looking at me differently. Mrs. Anderson once asked me to stay after class. "Sophia," she said gently, "you're one of my best students. Please don't let personal conflicts affect your future." "There isn't any conflict," she smiled sadly. "Then perhaps you should make more of an effort to include Chloe." I walked home that afternoon feeling completely defeated. No matter what I said, people had already decided who the victim was. And it wasn't me. Then came midterm exams. The day before the mathematics test, Chloe approached me with tears in her eyes. "I heard you're the smartest student in school." I nodded politely. "Would you maybe explain one question to me?" In my first life, I had smiled. Of course I would help. We spent nearly 2 hours in the library solving equations together. The next morning, the principal called me into his office. The examination committee had discovered handwritten answer sheets hidden inside my locker. Someone had reported that I planned to cheat. I stood there speechless while teachers searched through my belongings. Exactly where the anonymous report claimed they would be. They found them. Every answer, every formula, every page written in my own handwriting. I couldn't understand it. Those weren't my notes. I'd never seen them before. "I didn't put those there," I insisted. No one believed me. Chloe cried when she heard the news. "I can't believe Sophia would do something like that." She sounded heartbroken, as though she had just lost a friend. Adrian didn't even look at me. "I expected better from you." Those 6 words hurt more than the investigation itself. After years together, he never once asked if I was telling the truth. The school allowed me to remain because there wasn't enough evidence to expel me. But my perfect reputation was gone. I thought that would be the worst thing Chloe could do. I had no idea she was only getting started, because the trap that destroyed my future had already been set. A week after the cheating investigation ended, I convinced myself the nightmare was finally over. The answer sheets hadn't been enough to expel me, and although my reputation had been damaged, I still had my family, my grades, and the hope that time would eventually reveal the truth. I was wrong. Chloe had never intended to ruin only my academic record. She wanted my entire life. Westbridge Academy displayed a century-old trophy in a glass case outside the principal's office. It wasn't valuable because of the metal it was made from. It was valuable because it represented the school's history. Every student knew touching it without permission was strictly forbidden. On the morning of the annual Founders' Day ceremony, the trophy disappeared. Teachers searched every classroom while security reviewed the surveillance cameras. By lunchtime, the entire school was whispering about the theft. Then someone anonymously reported seeing me enter the trophy room before first period. I hadn't, but the cameras showed exactly that. There I was, walking into the hallway outside the principal's office. The recording never showed me leaving. The principal ordered every locker and every backpack to be searched. I stood in the middle of the hallway, surrounded by teachers, students, and parents who had gathered for the ceremony. When they opened my backpack, the trophy was inside. The hallway erupted into shocked whispers. No, I stepped backward. "I've never seen that before." The principal looked at me with disappointment instead of anger. "Sophia, why would you do this?" I didn't. I swear I didn't. No matter how loudly I repeated those words, they sounded weaker each time. Chloe suddenly covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "I knew Sophia was upset with me," she whispered. "But I never imagined she'd do something like this. Again." She never accused me directly. She simply stood there looking heartbroken, while everyone else reached the conclusion she wanted. Adrian stared at me as if he didn't recognize the girl standing before him. "I defended you after the cheating incident," he said quietly. "I told everyone you deserved another chance. I was telling the truth. Then, explain the trophy." "I can't." He closed his eyes for a moment before speaking the sentence that shattered the last piece of my heart. "I'm disappointed in you, Sophia." Not angry, not confused, disappointed, as if he had already decided the kind of person I was. That afternoon, the school board voted unanimously to expel me. Years of perfect grades, academic awards, national competitions, none of it mattered anymore. One accusation had erased everything I had spent my life building. I walked through the front gates carrying a cardboard box filled with books and certificates that suddenly meant nothing. Students watched from classroom windows. Some whispered, others simply looked away. Westbridge Academy had been my second home. I left through its gates as a criminal. I thought the humiliation would end there. Instead, it followed me home. When I opened our front door, my father was sitting silently at the dining table. His suit jacket lay folded beside him. My mother sat across from him, her eyes swollen from crying. "Dad?" He forced a smile that lasted less than a second. "I lost my job." The words barely sounded real. "What happened?" He looked down at his hands. "Mister, Hayes called me into his office this morning. My stomach tightened. He said Hayes Group couldn't continue employing someone whose family had brought shame to the company's reputation. My father had worked there for 23 years. 23 years. He wasn't dismissed because he had failed. He was dismissed because of me. Before I could even process it, my mother quietly spoke. I was let go too. The finance department claimed they were restructuring. We all knew the truth. No company owned by the Hayes family wanted the parents of an expelled student representing them. That night was the first time I ever saw my father cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. He simply sat alone on the back porch long after midnight, staring into the darkness, with his shoulders slumped forward. I had never realized how quickly a person's dignity could be taken away. Within 2 weeks, our lives changed completely. The savings my parents had spent years building disappeared into rent, bills, and debt. My father accepted a construction job that paid less than a quarter of his previous salary. Every evening he came home covered in dust, his hands cracked and bleeding from carrying concrete blocks he was never meant to lift at 52 years old. My mother found work cleaning office buildings during the night. She used to spend her days balancing company budgets. Now she scrubbed floors until sunrise. Neither of them complained, not once. That hurt more than if they had blamed me. Noah watched everything happen in silence. One evening, he quietly closed his engineering textbooks and slid them back onto the shelf. I'm going to get a job. No, my father answered immediately. Your education comes first. Noah smiled sadly. We can't afford my education anymore. He never returned to school. I tried applying for dozens of part-time jobs. Every interview ended the same way. The manager recognized my name, or searched it online, or remembered the news from Westbridge Academy. We'll call you. They never did. The label of thief followed me everywhere. Sometimes I caught my parents whispering after they thought I'd gone to bed. It's not her fault. I know. We'll get through this. But every morning they looked a little more tired than the day before. Watching them slowly sacrifice themselves because of lies I couldn't prove. That was the moment I truly understood. Chloe hadn't just stolen my future. She had stolen theirs too. And the worst was still waiting for us. The months that followed felt like watching my family disappear one piece at a time. My father never complained about the pain in his back, even after 12-hour shifts carrying steel beams and sacks of cement. Every evening he came home with a smile, pretending everything was fine, while my mother quietly wrapped his swollen hands in bandages. It's only temporary, he always said. We'll get back on our feet. I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But temporary became permanent. One rainy afternoon, he collapsed at the construction site. Years of stress, exhaustion, and untreated high blood pressure had finally caught up with him. By the time we reached the hospital, the doctors could only apologize. He died without ever seeing the little calf he had dreamed about for more than 20 years. My mother never recovered from losing him. She forced herself to keep working because someone had to pay the rent. But every day she looked smaller, weaker, as though grief itself was slowly consuming her. 6 months later, she was diagnosed with advanced lung disease after years of cleaning buildings with industrial chemicals and almost no protective equipment. The treatment was far beyond anything we could afford. The last thing she said to me was, "Don't blame yourself, Sophia. None of this was ever your fault." I held her hand until it became cold. I never had the chance to tell her how sorry I was. After the funeral, Noah became the man of the house, even though he had just turned 16. He found work at a small factory loading heavy machinery onto trucks. Every paycheck he brought home ended up paying bills instead of buying books. He still dreamed of becoming an engineer. He simply stopped believing dreams were meant for people like us. One evening, his supervisor ordered him to repair a damaged conveyor belt without shutting the machine down. Noah argued that it was unsafe, but he couldn't afford to lose his job. The machine malfunctioned. He pushed another worker out of the way. He never had time to save himself. When I identified his body, I felt as though my own heart had stopped beating. In less than 3 years, I had buried every member of my family. After that, life became meaningless. No one wanted to hire an expelled student with no references. I moved from one temporary job to another, barely earning enough to survive. Every birthday passed in silence. Every holiday reminded me of an empty chair around a table that no longer existed. Sometimes I walked past the cafe my parents had once dreamed of opening. I imagined my father greeting customers with his terrible jokes, while my mother served coffee with the same gentle smile she had always worn at home. It was a life that had never been allowed to exist. On March 17, 2009, I died alone in a tiny apartment. The doctors called it heart failure caused by severe malnutrition and chronic illness. I called it giving up. A loud voice pulled me back to reality. Sophia? I blinked. Mrs. Anderson was standing at the front of the classroom. Are you feeling all right? I looked around. Westbridge Academy. September 2, 2018. The first day Chloe Bennett had walked into my life. Tears suddenly filled my eyes. Not because I was sad, because I finally understood. I wasn't remembering the past. I was living before it. The bell rang, ending the first class. Students immediately gathered around Chloe to introduce themselves. Just like before, Adrian smiled as he offered to show her around campus. Just like before, except this time, I stood up, picked up my books, and walked straight past both of them without saying a word. Adrian looked surprised. Sophia? I didn't even turn around. In my first life, I would have waited for him after every class. This time, I let him go. That afternoon, I ran all the way home. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother smiled. You're home early. I threw my arms around her so tightly she laughed in confusion. Sophia, what's gotten into you? I couldn't answer. A few seconds later, my father walked into the hallway carrying his briefcase. There you are. I was just telling your mother that we should finally visit that little storefront downtown this weekend, the cafe. The dream they had abandoned in my first life. I grabbed both of their hands. Don't wait. They exchanged confused glances. What do you mean? You've spent years saving money for your own business. My father smiled. Maybe someday. No, my voice trembled. This year. Now. You've spent your whole lives building someone else's company. I looked directly into his eyes. It's time to build your own. Neither of them understood why their daughter suddenly seemed so certain. But for the first time, they listened. That evening, I found Noah buried beneath a pile of mathematics books. He looked up as I entered his room. Can you quiz me? I smiled through tears. Actually, I sat beside him. I think we're going to make sure you become an engineer. What? Not here. I pointed toward a brochure lying on his desk for an international science scholarship. You're going to study abroad. He laughed. That's impossible. I looked at my little brother, alive, healthy, and full of dreams that had never been stolen. No, I whispered. Impossible was our first life. I glanced out the bedroom window toward the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, Chloe Bennett was probably smiling as she began weaving the same web of lies that had once destroyed everything I loved. She believed she already knew how this story would end. She was wrong. Because this time, I remembered every move she was about to make, and I intended to make sure the only life she destroyed was her own. From the day I returned to Westbridge Academy, Chloe Bennett never stopped trying to destroy me. The difference was simple. This time, I already knew every move she was about to make. She expected me to react with anger. Instead, I gave her something far more dangerous. Silence. Every time she tried to provoke me, I simply smiled and walked away. Every time she pretended to cry, I quietly observed. The more I refused to play her game, the more desperate she became. Desperate people make mistakes. Her first attempt came during chemistry class. While the teacher was writing formulas on the board, Chloe quietly slipped a folded packet of exam answers into my backpack. In my first life, I hadn't noticed. This time, I watched her reflection through the classroom window. Without saying a word, I waited until the lunch bell rang. As students rushed into the hallway, I calmly exchanged our identical backpacks. Neither Chloe nor anyone else noticed. An hour later, the vice principal entered the classroom. Nobody leave your seats. We've received information that someone plans to cheat during tomorrow's examination. Teachers searched every backpack. When they unzipped Chloe's, the folded answer sheets fell onto her desk. The classroom became completely silent. I don't know how those got there. She looked around desperately. I've never seen those before. Exactly the words I had spoken in my first life. No one answered. Mrs. Anderson slowly removed the papers. Chloe Bennett, you receive a 2-week suspension while the Academic Integrity Committee investigates. For the first time since arriving at Westbridge, her perfect smile disappeared. But she learned nothing. If anything, she became even more reckless. After returning from suspension, she decided to recreate the staircase incident that had turned Adrian against me in my first life, only this time, I wasn't standing nearby. She deliberately stumbled down 3 steps and cried out in pain. Students rushed toward her, so Sophia pushed me. She stopped speaking, because everyone looked confused. Sophia isn't even here. One girl pointed toward the library. She hasn't left the study hall all afternoon. Chloe's expression froze. She had accused someone who wasn't even in the building. For the first time, people began whispering, "That's strange. Why would she lie?" Adrian frowned. It was only a small crack, but cracks spread. Over the following weeks, Chloe's stories became increasingly inconsistent. She claimed I had insulted her during lunch. Security cameras showed we had eaten in different buildings. She insisted I had torn pages from her notebook. The librarian confirmed the notebook had never even left the reading room. She accused me of spreading rumors. Students admitted she was the only one talking about me. Every failed scheme pushed another person away from her. The admiration she had worked so hard to build slowly transformed into suspicion. Meanwhile, I focused on living the life I had lost. My parents signed the lease for their little calf just before Christmas. It wasn't glamorous. The walls needed fresh paint. The furniture came from second-hand stores. My father repaired broken chairs himself while my mother experimented with coffee recipes late into the night. Every evening after school, I helped clean tables before doing homework behind the counter. For the first time in years, I saw genuine hope in their eyes. Noah studied beside me every night. I helped him prepare for engineering scholarship exams, correcting practice papers until midnight. Sometimes I caught myself simply watching him solve equations. Alive. Healthy. Laughing. In my first life, that laughter had disappeared forever. Now. It filled our home almost every evening. I realized something important. Revenge wasn't what made me happy. Saving my family was. By the end of the school year, I ranked first in every subject once again. I won the National Mathematics Olympiad, then the Regional Science Competition, then the State Debate Championship. Teachers began recommending me for international scholarships. The more recognition I received, the more invisible Chloe became. She couldn't accept it. One afternoon, I overheard her arguing with herself inside an empty classroom. Why isn't anything working anymore? Why does everyone still believe her? That was the moment I understood. She wasn't trying to become successful. She only wanted me to fail. Without my downfall, she had nothing left to celebrate. A few days later, Adrian stopped me outside the library. His expression was uncertain, almost guilty. "Sophia," I looked up from the books in my hands. "Can we talk?" I nodded politely. "What is it?" He hesitated longer than I had ever seen. "I've been thinking." He glanced toward the courtyard where Chloe was laughing with a group of classmates. "Maybe I judged you too quickly." For a brief moment, the old Sophia would have celebrated hearing those words. The girl who had loved him would have believed everything was finally returning to normal. But that girl had died long ago. I simply smiled. "I hope one day you learn to judge people by the truth." I walked past him before finishing the sentence. Instead of by whoever cries the loudest. I never looked back. Behind me, Adrian remained standing in the hallway, unable to explain the strange feeling growing inside his chest. For the first time since Chloe arrived at Westbridge Academy, he wasn't questioning me. He was beginning to question her, and that was exactly where her perfect little world began to collapse. The day Adrian began doubting Chloe, everything changed. She noticed it before anyone else. He no longer rushed to her side every time she sighed. He stopped walking her home after school. When she complained about me, instead of immediately believing her, he started asking questions. Questions she couldn't answer. For the first time since transferring to Westbridge Academy, she was losing control, and desperate people always make one final mistake. A month before graduation, the school prepared for its annual founders ceremony. Students, parents, alumni, and local business leaders would all attend. The centerpiece of the celebration was the Founders Trophy, displayed in a glass case in the main auditorium, exactly as it had been in my first life, exactly where Chloe had hidden it before framing me. Only this time, I was ready. Weeks earlier, I had quietly placed a tiny GPS tracker beneath the trophy's wooden base. It was invisible unless someone knew where to look. I didn't tell anyone. I simply waited. On the morning of the ceremony, the principal's voice echoed through the speakers. "Attention, everyone. The Founders Trophy has disappeared." The school immediately went into lockdown. Teachers searched classrooms. Security reviewed the cameras. Students whispered nervously in the hallways, just like before, except this time. I wasn't afraid. I opened the tracking app on my phone. A small blinking dot appeared. Storage room B, exactly where I expected. I walked straight to the principal's office. I think I know where it is. Minutes later, several teachers unlocked the storage room. The trophy sat on a shelf. Beside it, Chloe Bennett. She froze the moment the door opened. I can explain. The principal looked at her. Then explain. I found it here. You found it? Yes. And instead of telling anyone, she couldn't answer. Security pulled up footage from every hallway surrounding the auditorium. There she was, removing the trophy from its display case, looking around to make sure no one was watching, carrying it into the storage room. There was no missing footage. No mysterious blind spot. And no one else entered the room afterward. The evidence spoke for itself. The auditorium fell completely silent. Students stared at Chloe in disbelief. Mrs. Anderson slowly shook her head. All this time, you were lying. Chloe turned desperately toward Adrian. Please, you know I would never stop. His voice was calm, too calm. I believed you. She began crying. I was scared. I didn't mean for things to go this far. He closed his eyes. No, you meant every second of it. The principal removed her student identification badge. Chloe Bennett, you are expelled from Westbridge Academy, effective immediately. No one defended her. And no one protested. The same students who had once surrounded her with admiration silently stepped aside as security escorted her through the front gates. She looked back several times. Not one person followed. Graduation arrived 2 months later. I stood on stage as valedictorian, receiving the Academy's highest academic honor. The principal smiled proudly as he handed me my diploma. Westbridge Academy has never had a student quite like Sophia Carter. The audience erupted into applause. In the front row, my parents stood with tears in their eyes. Beside them, Noah waved so enthusiastically that everyone around him laughed. In my first life, none of them had lived long enough to see this day. This time, every sacrifice had been worth it. A week later, I received acceptance letters from 3 of the world's best universities. I chose Oxford, not because it was the most prestigious, because it offered the research program I had dreamed about since childhood. Noah earned a full engineering scholarship in Canada, exactly as I had hoped. My parents expanded their little cafe into a second location before I even finished my first year abroad. The dream they had buried for decades finally became reality. Years passed. While completing research for an international technology firm, I discovered something unexpected: financial records, false invoices, offshore accounts, illegal payments hidden beneath layers of shell companies, the name appearing again and again on those documents. Hayes Group. 81st. I wanted to ignore it. Their family had already disappeared from my life. Then I remembered my father carrying concrete until his hands bled, my mother coughing through the night after cleaning chemicals with no protection, Noah giving up his education because our family had nothing left. The truth deserved to be known. I copied every document legally available through the audit I was working on. I organized the evidence. Then I anonymously delivered everything to investigative journalists and the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. I never signed my name. I never contacted the media. I simply let the truth speak. 3 months later, the headlines were everywhere. Hayes Group under criminal investigation. Executives were arrested. Government contracts were canceled. Investors fled. The company's stock collapsed. The Hayes family lost nearly everything they had spent generations building. Justice hadn't arrived because I destroyed them. It arrived because they had destroyed themselves. Not long afterward, I heard another piece of news. Chloe had ended her relationship with Adrian the very week the scandal became public. She didn't even wait for the investigation to finish. Without the Hayes fortune, he was no longer useful to her. For the first time, Adrian understood the difference between someone who loved a person and someone who loved their wealth. 5 years later, I returned home to attend the opening of my parents' third cafe. The line stretched around the block. My father greeted customers with the same terrible jokes he had always loved. My mother still insisted on baking the first cake every morning herself. Noah had become one of the youngest structural engineers at his company. Watching them laugh together, I finally felt something I hadn't experienced in either life. Peace. As I stepped outside after the celebration, I noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. Adrian. He looked older than his age, not because of wrinkles, because regret has a way of aging people far faster than time. He walked toward me slowly. I wasn't sure you'd stop. I have a few minutes. He smiled sadly. I've replayed those years in my head thousands of times. I remained silent. I kept asking myself the same question. He looked directly into my eyes. What would have happened if I had trusted you? A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee from my parents' cafe. I smiled. You would have had a very different life. His eyes filled with hope. Then I continued. But so would I. He lowered his head. I loved you. I shook mine gently. No, you loved the version of me that was always waiting. He couldn't deny it. I finally realized. His voice trembled. You never asked me to choose between you and Chloe. I said nothing. You only wanted me to believe you. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, I'm sorry. This time, I believed him. I forgive you. His shoulders relaxed. Then I added softly, but forgiveness isn't a second chance. I've already lived one life waiting for you to see my worth. I smiled, not with sadness, but with gratitude. I'm not willing to waste this one. I turned and walked toward my family. My father raised a cup of coffee as soon as he saw me. Noah called my name. My mother laughed because they were arguing over whose recipe customers liked more. I had once believed love meant sacrificing everything for one person. I was wrong. Love was protecting the people who never stopped believing in me. As I reached my family, I looked back one final time. Adrian was still standing where I had left him. Years ago, I had been the one watching him walk away. Now, it was his turn. The difference was simple. When I loved him, I waited. When he finally understood my value, I had already built a life that no longer needed him. Some people are given a second chance to save the person they love. I was given mine. To save myself, and by choosing myself, I saved everyone else too.